Me too.
and not have score, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. So that messes up the recording.
Well, and they don't understand. They're like, well, why did you do the comment? Does he really have a problem? Is this all informational? You know what I mean?
And diffusion is not score based, right? Or it's some other.
Well, I would argue that neither is Gary.
Well, right, but
It pretends to be.
appears to be score based.
Yeah.
I mean, for anybody who's not using it for
Right. I mean, there's nothing in here numeric about it. You know what I mean?
definitely an unusual situation where you want
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. No, in differential, you basically say need to be. You mark something as need to be, and then you do comments. I feel like my class loaded, but I've been wrong before. I just I know that they're still using. I think my suspect is they're going to suspend the main development to team outside of themselves, but there's still teams, a few teams that use it.
I mean, if it's no longer on the original period,
No, it
shouldn't adopt it. But if
it's
still
totally
just something we're not pushing for that.
Yeah. No, my understanding is that it totally 100% is. It's just a huge intractable problem where every time they approach it, they realize.
It seems like we should have a user book.
It's converting.
No, I mean, what I mean is that Git is Git, and these are WIs for Git. So,
Right.
so it ought to be you have multiple front-end reviews. Oh, except that Git isn't comment or Git has to have some of that.
Git really has no concept of this sort of social thing, you know.
I actually have on my list of things to do someday to add review comment history to Git, because that's what I want when I look at a patch. I want to see the conversation that resulted in the patch that I want to write. And it's a trivial thing to get handled.
Hey, man.
Hey.
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen that done, but it surely makes sense.
Maybe it's not just enough to bring up additional.
It's me.
Anytime you want to start.
There's nobody here.
Even better.
Even better.
Now you can set policy with no sense.
That's right.
Oh yeah, we've been doing that.
We have quorum.
All right. So, Chase and I have a presentation. That's right, Chase, you're part of this presentation. Last year,
Is somebody supposed to be here directing this from the...
I think it just goes and whatever it sees, it sees.
Okay.
I don't believe it's recorded.
I think we're supposed to have somebody try to take notes on an Etherpad. There's probably some list somewhere of things we're supposed to do.
Additional job cards. I think
Roll cards.
I have a facilitator.
It's a small group. I don't think we can. So,
Yeah. Notes may or may not be useful.
no taker, we probably.
And somebody can yell at me and say, time.
You volunteer.
Are there ready-made deadlines for these things?
Yeah, I think if you find the schedule page on MediaWiki.org, I think there's already a hop
Okay, I'll have it second.
Do you mind watching IRC just a bit?
Yeah, on the off chance that there's anybody on the planet. Hello, planet. Yeah, so about the time of Wikimedia, whatever it was, 2016 in Italy, we were all in an IRC channel being upset that some tools were dying. And I said, God damn it, I should make a presentation and give it at Wikimedia. And this is my second dry run before I try to do it in Montreal. But the format here is quite a bit different, I think, than the Montreal one, where I will be talking out to people who are largely the editor community on Wiki. What I really like from this talk is more ideas about things related to what hopefully we'll set up here at the beginning and then move past. So developing community norms provide lots of tools, or don't let your brother-in-law's niece be the only person who keeps your community running. At the beginning here, Chase is going to have to talk because
Sure.
he made some
We
slides.
can go quickly.
Some slides about
Let's do it.
language norms.
Yeah,
what,
sure.
what are the terms we're going to be using?
Everyone, I think, here knows, but it's better to be explicit. So we have an OpenStack cloud, which we use as infrastructure as a service. You can have a VM or a project that has quota, and then we being the foundation, have our own sort of projects which we run officially and unofficially, I would argue.
Slide.
Next slide. Tool Labs. Tool Labs is one of these projects, and it's a low barrier to entry environment where you can, in theory, write code and run it with the minimum amount of pomp and circumstance. And then there are a lot of things running on the platform. We have long-running bots, short-running bots, one-time bots, recurring bots, which I guess would be scheduled jobs, ad hoc process. You've got a bunch of people doing research, and then you have somewhere in excess of 1,000 different web services that are written by everyone you can think of. And we use kind of tool as a generic for all of these things.
Yeah, I think officially, when we send out the annual survey, there's officially a sentence in there that says we don't have a definition for what tool is.
Right.
It's all the things.
If it's like a distinct entity that is meant to be run on the platform, then we call it a tool. And then it's really ham-fisted to put open source up at this conference, but the reason I did it is because as far as making our code available, we just stink at it. Like, we have tons of people who have written all kinds of really important bots, and wherever the code lives, if they've deployed some binary thing, half the time we don't know. And the worst part about that is that, like, historically it's just been fine. Like, we've just kind of rolled with it. Like, if you wrote something that now Wikimedia Germany depends on for all of their work every day, and no one has the source code to it, historically that wasn't viewed with sort of the evil eye, but now it is. That's what we're saying. And then just what norms are, basically. Expected behavior, community standards, technical, non-technical.
All right, so this is kind of the thesis for the talk that was based around it. The tools are actually a vital. It used to say critical instead of vital, and MZ gave me a whole bunch of runaround about the word critical, so the word critical became vital. But a vital resource for on-wiki content creation and curation activities. This was kind of the rallying statement that got me the job that I started in April 2016 as community tech's outreach liaison / helper / whatever to the Tool Labs environment. And I have some stuff here that I think to some extent backs up my thesis. Maybe doesn't prove it, but this is a number from a 90-day period from September to November of 2016. 24.67% of edits across all wikis on all Wikimedia run properties originated from IP addresses in the labs environment. If I had my speaker notes here, I've got some breakdowns too, but it was, Wikidata was on the order of 50% of Wikidata edits came out, and I think just under 8% of EN Wiki edits were from our IP space.
Is 53% of Wikidata and 8.9% of the MWiki.
Thank you, Reedman. And then another, for basically the same time period, a 90-day window, 3.8 billion individual API requests originated from the lab's IP space to the Wikimedia farm. And again, I don't have my speaker notes. I think this was about, let's say, on the order of 10% of all the API requests that were made in the Action API. I like this number because anytime you can say billion, it's pretty cool. And here's something that's a little less like Lucy. Let's throw up some random numbers. So Hafeker was a co-author of a paper in 2013 about ClueBotNG, which is just one of the upteen zillion bots that runs in labs. The time period measured was, I think, the first quarter of 2011. And the bot at that time was having some, it would go up and go down and go up and go down. And so he had this data that he could look at when it was up, and ClueBotNG was doing what it does, which is basically revert things that look like obviously bad edits. The mean time to revert, it's about 12 and a half minutes for a bad edit, or for an edit that was eventually going to disappear. And when it was down, that time came close to double. So the bot's a lot faster than human beings. But one of the interesting things in the paper was that things did eventually go away. So the bots aren't critical, but they're.
Well, this is just one bot, right? I know most of the people who watch for edit revision history do some of the other bots. So.
Yeah, this is just when NG is just one very, very, very weak AI. It's just a little collection of heuristics that basically, if it sees an edit that blanks a page, it says no, you can't do that. If it sees several other kinds of things like that, it backs them out. So, all tools are unique snowflakes. We have 1,500-ish tool accounts. Some are maintained by full-time professional software developers. Some are maintained by somebody who figured out how to use Stack Overflow last week. And I don't mean that to be disparaging. It's just the reality of it. Some tools have multiple maintainers. There's a couple I can think of that have 10 or 15 different people that will show up and fix them. Most tools have a single maintainer. Some tools use version control, most tools don't. Well, that's maybe an overgeneralization. Some do, some don't. They're written in just about every programming language that I've ever seen actually used to do anything in the real world.
Yep.
We have one that's written in Tickle. But not just any old Tickle, it's written in a custom compiled Tickle that does something different than any other Tickle that ever existed in the world. And I don't mean any of that to be disparaging about how anything is built or why anything is built or who does it. Everybody who's doing things in Tool Labs is doing awesome things that are within the bounds of capability and time and other resources that they have, but there's no, every tool is a unique snowflake. There's no prototypical tool, there's no, this is how they all work. In this great and varied ecosystem, I've noticed a few things that go wrong more often than I would like them to. And so I've got I've got two stories, and again, in the Wikimedia version of this talk, this is the meat of the whole thing, is telling these, like, there was this thing, and this thing, and this thing. We're gonna kind of fast forward through that, but we'll hit a little bit of it. So the first one is just the tiniest little thing, but it's the hugest thing. There's a tool that exists, it's a web service, and it does KML data files. So it makes data representations that can be overlaid on Google Maps or Google World and to look at things. And it's used to extract geocoordinates from articles and then make these overlays. And it is, there's a template on MediaWiki, there's a template on German Wikipedia, and several other pretty large wikis that have pretty highly transcoded templates that make direct links into this tool. And it started having some problems. It was having frequent out-of-memory errors, it was crashing. People cared so much about it that they came on IRC to find us and say, hey, can you restart this web service because it's down? UV and Valhalla both, over the course of about 2 months, spent at least a week's worth of time trying to make this thing better, trying to keep it up, moving it. It was one of the first things that was moved under our Kubernetes service because we thought that the Kubernetes system would be more robust and stable for it. And things got better, but it wasn't great. And it got to the point that somebody filed a Fabricator task proposing basically a rewrite of it to fix it up. And the reason that they went that far was that they had tried on Wiki and on Fabricator to contact the sole tool maintainer and get them to provide some information. Nothing happened to that initially. Eventually I noticed the Fabricator task and I went and used my powers of bugging people every 5 minutes until they pay attention to me to get a response from the original author. And he had a perfectly fine story. He said, like, hey, you know, I made that thing and it's cool that people use it, but I'm not interested in it anymore. I'm over here working in Wikidata now and I think they're doing better things with geocoordinates, so I don't really care about that thing. But hey, if anybody wants to take it and take it over, that's fine, they should do that. And one of the problems with that I pointed out in the request to him, there was no license for the tool. So it was a single Perl file sitting in a directory with no license information in the header, no license information in the body, in the footer, in the side, in anything. And their response on Fabricator was, yeah, software licenses, I don't know, just do whatever you want with it, I don't care. That's bad, really bad, really bad. And the reason it's really bad is that we can't just do that, right? Like, just like I can't take some random thing I find on the street and put it on Commons and say, well, I don't know, I found this thing on the street, nobody was looking after it, we need to take care of it, so it's on Commons now, right? Like the commonists would rightly, you don't have license, you don't have ownership, you can't do that. In the United States, if you don't provide a license and you don't somehow release your intrinsic ownership copyright, I have to wait until 70 years after you're dead to take over your stuff. And that 70 years number is just going to keep getting larger as long as the mouse is still around. So that's a little thing. That was supposed to be short, but it was really long. So this other one, and I keep making eye contact with Brandon because I knew this slide was coming. Not a little thing. This is this particular definition of the tool story is about one where every little thing all happened over the course of 283 days until there was no more that we could do for it. So there's a bot that's a very active editing bot on German Wikipedia, and we noticed as we were doing the wind down tasks for the conversion from HTTP to HTTPS that this particular bot was pretty high on the leader list of things that we're still making on a regular basis HTTP connections instead of HTTPS. And so I think Brandon made the first contact. Brandon pinged the author on the mega tracking bug that we were doing about all the things that were on the leaderboard. And the author showed up and said, hey, yeah, I'd love to fix my thing, but it's written in Java, and you guys have a crappy old version of Java, and I can't fix my code with the crappy old version of Java that you're running. I think we have 1.7 running on Tool Labs, and they wanted 1.8 at the time. And so, that was written down, kind of got lost in the noise a little bit. I don't think we connected the author very well at the time, but we had already, by this time, investigated a Java 1.8 upgrade and had a pretty detailed task that laid out, these are all the things that we look for about how we can fix it, and we can't do it right now. A couple months went by, we looked at the scoreboard again. I think at that point, this particular user was the number one. I think we knocked off the ones above them, and they were left at the very top. Pinged them again, fundamentally got the same response. Moved on with our lives. Another month went by, and another user who had been watching the mega tracking bug filed a new bug, again asking for the Java upgrade. Again, I think Valhalla this time went through and tried just about every idea that we could try to try to figure out how to get Java upgraded. No luck. The story kind of goes on like this in these bad circles, and I'm not telling it with near the force that it makes my stomach hurt to even think
I
about.
think the ultimate incompatibility at the time was a grid engine.
Yeah.
We could upgrade the OS to get Java 1.8, but then grid engine wouldn't work on it. We could stay where grid engine would work and not get his job. Right. It was a grid engine based tool. So
Yeah, that was basically it. So then we were getting near the end of the time window when we said we were going to keep the secret loophole open that kept all this stuff working. And I finally looked into what did this bot do, because it was making a lot of requests. Were these requests actually useful? And that's when I found out that it performed like 2/3 of the archiving tasks on all of German Wikipedia, like daily, weekly, monthly archiving, and all kinds of other things. So we realized, like, hey, this is going to be disruptive if we just kill this sucker. So I tried reaching out to the author again, and didn't get any answer. So then I actually went and contacted Wikimedia Germany to see if they could hook us up with the author or with somebody else who would know something about it. And
We were at the anyone who cares stage.
yeah, this is probably about 2 weeks from shutdown. And the last really big blocker that we were worried about. And we found out that the author was on a wiki break, not a wiki break that they really wanted to be on, but they were on a wiki break and there wasn't really anything they were going to do about it. So we weren't going to be able to get their help for a while. So after much hemming and hawing about this isn't my job, but damn it, somebody's got to do it, I rolled up my sleeves and jumped into the tool using the superpowers I had at the time as a co-maintainer on tools of the platform So, and found out that yes, the tool was written in Java. No, there was no visible license, and no, there was no visible source code. There were compressed jar files and a shell script that executed the compressed jar files. So the first thing we tried was we tried to write a reverse proxy. We tried to make it not be Brandon's problem and instead be my problem, and put a shim in between. That almost worked, except some requests weren't getting redirected. Actually, no, the majority of requests weren't getting redirected. Some were getting proxied, and the majority weren't. So I decided, okay, well, as long as I'm playing the hero, let's really play the hero. And I decompiled the jar file and figured out what libraries he was using, and found that he was using an Apache wrapper over the HTTP connections that, through the beauty and wisdom of whoever wrote it in the Apache project, by default did not respect the standardized proxy flags that you can give to Java, but instead offered an opportunity to write your own custom shim to tell it how to use a proxy. That's pretty much the end of the story. At that point, I was not willing to.
There was one more minor point in the middle there too. At one point on the ticket, the author claimed that the source code was licensed under the Mozilla Bill of License. That was his whole statement on it, but never provided a link to where the source was or source code.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that came in the day before I said fuck it and shut it down. And there's an even longer version with more parts about this, but that's the perfect storm is that, you know, that there were lots of little places along the way. The shutdown day was 283 days after the first contact day, and there were lots of places along the way that something could have been made better by somebody if we'd done something, but it didn't happen. The bot got shut down. Luckily, German Wikipedia still survives. Some people came in, wrote some new bots, took over the tasks.
They replaced it, basically. Yeah. We had rattled enough sabers to kind of loop some people in, and we cried desperation loudly enough. And also said, so I mean, the whole process of reverse engineering one single bot, it's completely not scalable. And there are so many bots, tools in this sort of state that there comes a time when it's just not possible for the royal we, who is, you know, four people or so, to do this continually. And so we essentially told them, we will do anything to help you, but we don't have the ability to reinvent this. And it must be important because they found people.
Yeah, and it must not have been that hard to fix because, as far as I know, like a week later,
It was quite fast, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, thinking about that was about the time then that this talk came into being. It was right around then. And one of the things that I thought about as those couple of examples, and we have some others that have existed, is that there are a few what I think are pretty simple norms that we can borrow from most open source culture and try to promote that might help with these things. So this is kind of the list of things that, again, I'm going to be speaking at Wikimania to, trying to get the bot approver groups and the various groups that are on the wikis that interact with these things before they turn into a giant pile of mess to try to kind of like adopt and promote to people. Pick a license. I'm going to work on, it's on my personal team roadmap for this January to March quarter to actually make that easier to do, and actually to try to integrate it into the act of creating a tool count itself, that when you say, my tool's named foo, its license is bar. And if you don't put in a license, the form just keeps coming back and saying like, no, I'm sorry, I don't see a license here yet. You need to have a license. And obviously, you know, like a lot of tools are hard to pick a license for, so it won't be like, you can't have another file that's in the directory that's underneath another license. It's just, if there's no license stated, this is the default license.
Well, and it's worth noting that it's technically always been this way. We don't run code that's not open source. It's just no one ever really worried about what that meant. You know what I mean? You can't run closed source code on the platform, but we have code which is not available. So the distinctions there become really meaningful when you go to actually fix it.
Yeah, and it's fundamentally an enforcement problem, right? Like, we don't self-merge, except, well, we all self-merge, right? So we're going to try to make it harder to get around that particular one. To publish the code, I don't make a tarball once on every third Wednesday and put it somewhere. Use version control. Hey, I've got tools and I would be glad to help you use version control. Do something. Yui and I have some ideas about lowering the bar for this even farther for people who don't like version control systems. Have multiple maintainers. Right? This is one of the big ones for that. Both of them really, but fundamentally for the second use case. If there had been one other person on the planet who had any idea what this tool did and any idea how it did it, they probably would have also had source code. And they would have been able to either work on fixing it or help us help them learn to fix it. And that leads, I think the multiple maintainers and the write some documentation kind of go hand in hand. We've made a special namespace on Wikitech in case there's nowhere else in the world that you can figure out how to document your stuff. Write down, how do I start this thing? How do I stop this thing? And ideally, again, like some idea of like what it does, what other resources does it use? Like, does this melt when Redis is gone? That kind of stuff. And Chase added this last one, and it's a good one, and I feel bad that I hadn't seen this last bullet point when I was writing things down before. Participate in the community, and by community is a loaded word, especially in the Wikimedia Foundation, but particularly here we mean the Tool Labs developer community. And I think the next slide, here's the Labs developer community. We've got some mailing lists, got an IRC channel, we've got Wikitech Wiki, and once a year, 2 years running, so we can actually say annual survey now.
That's great.
We try to do a survey to ask you, like, do we suck? Do we not suck? Did we do something good? Do you have some feedback? And it may not be highly visible yet how we're actioning on those surveys, but we do talk about them a lot, and we're pointing at them a lot, and we're using them to change some of the direction slowly about where we're going. So then we've also been working, the whole Tool Labs community has been working with me kind of being the ringleader over the last 6 to 8 months now on filling in some policies that were never there. Just stuff that nobody ever got around to making up before. So we've got 2 that went through drafts and comments and reviews and all the way to RFC votes on Meta and have been approved by the community. And we're in the final stages now of both of these policies, and I'll talk a little bit more about them, involve a volunteer committee to help make them happen, to help get action on them. And we're in the final stages of putting together that committee. So hopefully over the next couple of weeks, I'll be able to send out some nice announcements about here's your shiny new committee and your shiny new policies, and let's do some stuff. So the two we came up with, the right to fork policy is kind of a codification of our existing open source requirement. And what it fundamentally says is that every tool has to have an OSI approved license. You can dual license if you want. If you want to do it under MIT plus what the fuck public license, you can do that. But one of them's got to be an OSI non-crayon license. That's the only must in the policy for a tool maintainer. And then there's a whole bunch of shoulds. Should publish your code, should have multiple maintainers. Multiple maintainers actually maybe do that again. Should. And then the place where the committee comes in, and then it defines for anybody who's not the maintainer of a tool, a path to say, I would like to make this tool better, and I've talked to the maintainer and they don't want me to fix their tool, so I'd like a copy of it to start from. I'd like to fork it and go do my thing. And it gives a procedure, a general checklist procedure about how to do that. And then the place where the committee comes in is that the committee is kind of the arbiter between the current maintainer / copyright owner / whatever and the people who want to do it to try to facilitate that and get it done. And then the abandoned tool policy builds on top of the right to fork policy. I would really like to see people fork. Yep.
So part of that whole deal is sort of born out of some social etiquette particulars that come up quite often, which is one user has a tool, someone shows up, it's down, we haven't seen the primary maintainer in who knows, but that's not unusual. We have people who do it only when they're at college, we have people who disappear for 6 weeks during the holidays, every schedule you can imagine. Not being able to get a hold of someone for a month is not crazy. But what do? It's somewhat not polite to just add a co-maintainer for them without talking to them, but yet their tool may be in trouble. And historically, we've sort of gone with a desperation / consensus model, which says if a bunch of people show up and say this is important and no one who knows about it is around and you're willing to fix it, then we're going to add you and we're just going to do our best to let the original people know because that's the best we can do. But with some kind of, I don't know that oversight's the right word, but with some committee in place to kind of keep everyone honest and so that folks know up front, if you wrote a thing and it's awesome and people are really using it, try to be communicative because if not, you may end up with a co-maintainer, So I think it's sort of around just establishing these social norms that are so odd because we have so many distinct projects and the people who control them may or may not be available depending on the phase of the moon.
Yeah, and so that forcibly adding a co-maintainer is step 1 in the abandoned tool policy. That's adoption. And then if you adopt successfully and everything goes well and the original maintainer never shows up or the original maintainer comes back,
Is there a timeline to these?
Yeah.
If you're unresponsive for, what is it, 60 days or something, when we assign a co-maintainer?
Yeah, we put some stuff in there and we tried to strike a balance, right, between long enough that it was annoying that people wouldn't come in 5 seconds it's down and say, you need to put me in there now, but not so long that the tool is down forever.
What is that first lead time before we might look at co-maintainer or something?
I think it's written in the policy, it's on Wikitech. I think it's 14 days, which through various drafts over a year and a half, that went from 90 days to 3 days, and I think we ended up back and forth. So that's
a lot of downtime if it's a tool that people care about.
Yeah, I mean,
and so that's for there's 2 stages of the abandoned tool. There's adoption and usurpation. And so adoption is you get added as a co-maintainer and you can go in there and try to fluff it up. And then usurpation is now it's yours and you can kick the old person out. And that can't happen. There's a much longer timeline for that, and a whole bunch of the things that are shoulds in the right to fork policy have to flip to musts.
Okay.
So you have to basically show that you're an exemplar maintainer and you're doing everything just right, and okay, now it's yours.
Yeah, and I think the we of the Tool Labs admins, not all of which by any means are Foundation employees, pretty much always reserve the right to go and kick your thing if it goes down.
Oh yeah.
So that's just part of the deal.
Yeah, and we'll see how it works. Like, this is a policy written on a wiki, so we can make changes to it as it goes along. A big part of both of these for me too was putting a volunteer committee in control. This is not WMF action by fiat. This is, you know, your peers who are doing the same things you are, who are, you know, we're all Wikimedians, and they're taking care of it.
Speaking of which, there are people on these committees who are here. They're not in this room. So when they watch this video later, they should be ashamed. Oh, you're here.
No,
Okay.
I had a question. So would this be an on-wiki process, and like request for adminship or something like that?
Yeah, we think very similar. So that part is not strictly codified yet, because I want to get the committee together and let the committee do it. I basically want to treat them like the stewards group. These are really smart, dedicated people who are going to do good things, and so let's give them some space and let them figure out what's going to work. Because again, it's not my baby, it's not the WMF's baby. This is about Tool Labs community building.
Yeah.
And there have already actually been suggestions that it gets expanded beyond Tool Labs to all of labs, but we want to let's crawl before we run. let's see.
And extensions and edits and all these things have these problems, right? So,
Yeah.
but
on Wiki, it's not such a big problem. In extensions, it's not such a big problem, right? Because an extension doesn't go on the cluster unless it's in Garrett. And when it's in Garrett, it's owned by everybody. Somebody may be the one that we look to +2 things, but it's owned by everybody. But tools, again, because everyone's a unique snowflake, they're a little different. So yeah, inspect and adapt, right? We don't know that these rules are going to work. I don't know that the proposed FOSS kind of guidelines are going to work, but we want to get started and then fix it as we go along.
I think the committee ended up being 7 people.
Yeah.
Is that right? None of whom are Foundation employees. And we've got to turn. Oh wait. Well, okay, one person. Is Foundation employee. I assume that's Nick.
Yeah.
And we turn people down, so there's interest. That's the interesting part.
Yeah, this was all really much better received than I had been led to believe it was going to be when I started off tilting at the windmill. So this is really, now we're at the part, and hopefully I didn't burn up all the time just sweating and yammering up here. Now we're at the part where I want feedback from anybody who's interested in giving feedback in this room about, like, beyond what I've talked about, what are we missing? What else could we do? Like, what kind of tools?
I have lots of ideas. So, like, one thing I think would be cool is to implement all this, which all this is really awesome to see happening. I'm really proud of this. Would be, I don't know if maybe you do it as categorization or something, but the idea of, like, tying an SLA to a checklist of practices. Like, sure, we have all these norms and there's these things we want you to do, but, you know, if you do the bare minimum, you know, then we make a certain effort to keep your tool alive. But, you know, if you have checked all 10 boxes and been verified to have your published source code that's open source and a list of approved languages and have a repository and blah, 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 you know, we put a different flag on your tool that says we guarantee you more maintainability because we know we can work with this.
Right.
And then that flagging system kind of gives also the wiki communities, you know, DWiki can say, well, we rely on these 10 bots, and when you look at that list, 8 of them are in a really good SLA category, and 2 of them are in the not so well maintained category. Maybe we should be concerned about them and get them promoted to that category, right?
Totally.
Like some kind of concept like that.
So I have this task that I had assigned to me for like 2 years, and something in me just won't let it go. I have no other tasks that I haven't unassigned because I haven't closed them. With this one task, something in me can't relinquish. And that is essentially to define support levels across labs, which is more generic. But that's the idea we came up with, which is markers that indicate basically your commitment, which allows us to mirror, you know what I mean? Or at least ideally. The barriers there are, we honestly probably don't have time to reflect the goodwill of everybody. If everyone showed up and did everything right, we'd be like, oh, we're screwed now. Which may be a decent place to be, I don't know. And then I think the other thing is we're working towards that checklist, and we just haven't written it down. I think we all have, like we've internalized some version of that. And what happens is some tool goes down, you go and look at it, and you run through, okay, there's not a license, and it's written in mono and whatever, written in C#, and like it's running through the mono and whatever. And maybe you're thinking, oh dear God. But eventually, we usually come out the other side telling the person who maintains the tool, like, here's what we can offer you, and it might not be much, but it's something.
Well, it would just be good to have those up front, right? Because eventually when you hit that emergency and that tool is down and somebody's trying to fix it, you're going to run into, well, here's the slowdowns, here's the bottlenecks for why we couldn't fix it for you very easily, because we did all these roadblocky things that are not really necessarily the best norms. At least we could, instead of figuring that out in the outage, we can flag those things up front. We can categorize tools into support levels, and say, look, if you check all of these boxes, not all of which are strict requirements, you can go outside that. If you check all these boxes, we're going to provide you a higher level of support and flag your bot as more approved.
Do you think? Oh, I'm sorry.
I like the idea of having there be carrots like that for people that comply, but the thing is that it's, certainly in Brian's examples, the people that suffered when the tools died were not the people who wrote the tools. And so the incentives aren't aligned very closely. If there was some way for...
I agree, but we could loop that by like having ultimately the status being a flag on that tool. Like when it makes edits on MediaWiki, it's by whatever bot, and it's got a little icon next to it that says like super good bot versus questionable bot.
Right.
It would have been if there's some way all these edits are happening from this not very well maintained bot.
Yeah, so I use this financial app to track our stuff, and it analyzes your stuff like, do you have any money saved? Do you spend more than you make? And it does this like, yeah, or oh no. And it also has next to it, has like, how do you compare to your peers? Oh shit, dude, you're broke. And some version of that would be cool.
And as far as like defining what those checkboxes are, obviously the existing thing with the committee and all of that, and their kind of norms and standards and these policies is a starting point. And at the other end of the spectrum, we could look at where we've, at least in some areas, defined production practices, right? Because the ultimate goal, moving up that chain, is your code is so important and so well maintained, it moves into like a MediaWiki extension. It's part of our Garrett internal stuff and everything, right?
Sort of.
So I'm just saying that could be the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
We say like if you're on a list of languages that we support with our production developers, and like we're in a Git repository that we can do.
Right.
It provides a target to aim the checkboxes toward the categories, right?
Well, the most
And
extreme,
for eventual promotion as well, right?
the most extreme example would be if we got the wiki people to decline to offer black flag to a bot.
Yeah.
And
that's
the Wikimedia talk. That's the right. Like, but and your idea is a good one. Like, and we it actually came up. Valhalla was at an editathon.
A well-known volunteer.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. He's one of the 2 volunteer admins in Tool Lab, so he's got full root in Tool Labs and does all kinds of awesome stuff for us. He was at an editathon somewhere around where he lives, and I had him. He was like, "I'm going to meet these people. What should I say?" And I was like, "Ask him about this stuff." And that was one of the suggestions they came back with, was some sort of, like A+ to D- sort of rating system that could somehow be made visible. How to make it visible, that's a whole nother question.
Yeah, I really feel your pain. And so what I worry about is I'm going to end up causing more pain down the road. Like, before our perfect storm in 283 days, it was this big major effort that like was a year-long thing for the whole foundation. But like those changes are coming more rapidly, down the road. And like when we're looking at those from a public-facing perspective, we're not trying to be very leading edge. Usually when we finally kill something from a public perspective, it's like, and there's this 0.01% of crappy browsers in the world that aren't compatible with this, and we're really kill them. And they're like things that haven't been patched in 8 years. But now we know that like the other thing that will fall into that category is some percentage of tools, because some of them also fall that far behind on software levels and so on. And I mean, the pace of innovation and change and necessity of change for security reasons and all of that will continue to increase, and we will have more of those perfect storm moments, if we don't. Totally.
Well, it's all happening in March because we're becoming precise, and so we gotta have whole.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going through another long tail phase of it right now.
So we have this, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I had a different thread, so.
Oh, okay. So we have this internal narrative in like the labs team, which is we're really overloaded and there's just no way we can get all of this done. That's a good thing. The platform's really popular and like there's too many tools for us to support, and all these people are showing up saying these tools are down and it's really impactful to their workflow, and we're like, I'm not sure how we're gonna get to this, but the platform's really used a lot. Like that's really kind of amazing to me. So we have this sort of dichotomy, good, bad problem that I think speaks to that, and it's only going to get worse. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the issue around like a lot of Google groups and the different projects, and like a lot of them like don't want to require open sourcing code, and from what I read from a lot of these cases, like a lot of the arguments are made, it's like, oh, this code is too dangerous for anyone to be able to use it, the vandals and the spammers are getting, But I'm wondering if there could be some sort of offering of like private repositories or something that they're going to have to offer to a lot of Google groups and say, if you want to be able to require people to have the code not open source to the world, but at least like in a central thing, here's what you could require, as opposed to saying like,
I don't buy into that at all.
It's a topic that's come up before, and the potential for a code escrow service, it's there, but I do not believe any of the arguments that there is such super secret mega sauce in any of these piles of regexes.
I mean, like I'm not in the position they are to actually affect any of this, but that would be my personal opinion as well, as those are bogus arguments, and we probably shouldn't entertain those arguments. We should set people straight that that's not the way to do things.
And I think the other way to look at it is to help people understand, like, honestly, a lot of people don't want to show their source code because they're ashamed of their source code.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the other thing to help people understand is that we're all ashamed of our source code.
That's like one of those important turning points as a developer is when you realize your own code sucks and always will, and everybody's code sucks and always will, and there's no reason to be ashamed.
Right.
People over that hurdle.
And I have talked to a lot of, okay, this is random hearsay, but I've talked to several foundation employees that was the scariest thing for their first 6 months of working here, was that every code review they got wasn't public. Right?
So are y'all pushing then for like a lot of Google groups then require open sourcing of code?
It has always been a requirement in terms of use.
Well, so there's a difference between licensing and publication.
Yeah.
And it's always been a requirement to have a license. If Ryan Lane was here, he could tell us what his intent was when he wrote some vague words on the wiki a while
But
ago.
you have to hand it to somebody with that license too, or else there's no
Right.
license to anyone.
Yeah.
You have to hand it in.
It's hand waving, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that would be my
And
suggestion.
honestly, I mean, in the rare cases where there is a need for a secret, it shouldn't be secret code, it should be secret data, and that's a whole different issue.
Yeah.
You have
Agreed.
source code that loads a tiny set of secret data.
Yeah, and there are some things we're hoping to work towards with that, especially with the Kubernetes migration. Like Kubernetes actually has a whole like system built inside of it for handling that separation. You have something?
Yeah. Like, I have one. Yeah, I'm faculty. I have one tool and I went down the other day and all I had to do was restart the service. And I discovered because I'm working on it. And it's probably my own fault, but I don't get emails when that's down. So, but I'm not sure, like I would love some monitoring.
Monitoring and metrics,
monitoring
yes.
my software.
Yeah.
And we would love to have it on that.
So, in theory, the Big Brother system tries to keep grid engine submitted jobs that are set up with it running. In theory.
Yeah.
In practice, it may or may not work for yours. The funny thing about trying to write your own reconciliation loop system on top of Open Grid Engine is that it's a little bad. Web service has it now built in.
Well, I think he's primarily talking about notification, regardless of automated action.
Yeah, because
which
if
we-
your job
we-
dies,
you're right,
there's
we-
nothing, restarting it is a good thing.
We're terrible at it.
Yeah.
Some people have written their own, and there's a project which either we just granted quota to, or I can't remember, where several tool labs people are basically trying to solve the problem on their own. But we don't have a few things in this arena, or a lot of things. We don't have like hey, this would be a great release process for you to do on this platform. You know what I mean? Like here's sort of the vanilla version of that. Maybe you need to add something to the beginning and the end, but makes it predictable for everybody. We don't have a good log aggregation system. Well, we don't have any log aggregation system. And that's like a ginormous pain point for me particularly. And then we also don't have like real deal user tool monitoring. I mean, we have people who have written their own, we have a lot of ad hoc stuff, and then we have, the grid has some functions where like if your job gets killed unexpectedly, it'll send an email or whatever. But it's all pretty rinky. So I would say that you're just right. What you want is perfectly reasonable, and yet it doesn't exist yet. And in my mind, those things as standards, and like so everyone, because one thing about even if someone has gone ahead and been proactive and written something to monitor their tool, that's awesome, but then like I have to not only figure out your tool, but like how you're monitoring it, what that means, and everyone's doing this slightly different, or we have a lot of people who have, maybe they've used like the native Python log rotation stuff, and it's pretty easy for me to reason about, but more than likely not. They probably wrote something that just clobbers a bunch of files and who knows what, you know, shuts their own service down and does a removal on a directory, and you know, eventually that falls apart and they don't know if it's us or them. But the real like valuable piece there is that there's no one single sort of curated way to do it. And that is, in my mind, sort of on this list next. If there was another slide here, it would definitely include those things. And we know it more so.
Yeah, well, it's not a little bit won't
It's not you, it's us.
Yeah.
Could that maybe be like in the future as one of these future possibilities, like just a standard for monitoring?
Yeah,
As
totally.
in, like, we expect everybody to, you know, if they want good support or whatever, to write a tool that conforms to X, like a
Right.
script that does the Nagios style exit codes and checks whatever it needs to check about process states and provides an email address to notify
Right.
or something, right? And
I mean,
a standardized, something where you can write a script with an exit code and it monitors whatever you want to monitor about your tool.
Right.
We can invoke it.
Yeah, and the hardest part for me about that, like I totally,
Yeah.
like that is an answer, right? Like that is the answer we would use in production or something similar to it. But the hard part for me about that is that that's a 1%er solution, right? Like I know that most of the people that are using tool labs to do stuff, they can't do that. And they can't do it because they don't have the time, they don't have the energy, they don't have the commitment, right? Like if they could do that stuff, we would have already hired them and they would be moving their stuff into production, right?
or they would be constantly fending us off from trying to hire them.
Yeah, but so some things we're hopeful of in the future. I'm not going to make any promises because making promises is a way to just make people sad. But we were trying last quarter, and I don't know that we've necessarily succeeded, but we've been trying to collect a series of requirements for a true platform as a service product. So to replace Open Grid Engine with, we're replacing Open Grid Engine with Kubernetes. That is a known thing, that is happening, that's in progress. What we would like to do is, rather than make our own collection of Perl and Python scripts that figure out how to put jobs into Kubernetes, which aren't called jobs anymore, but let's just say jobs into Kubernetes.
We're talking about the push to deploy model, essentially.
Yeah, we would like to get a true, a third-party developed, open source, well-supported platform as a service layer to put on top of Kubernetes. And that's certainly one of the criteria that we've got on the checklist is what kind of monitoring, what kind of notification, what kind of feedback loops does it have to help people understand. We've got a whole lot of eggs of hope in the basket of could OpenShift or DS or some other product that we haven't yet identified that exists in the marketplace get us, give us a big boost, right? Like not just like a little incremental, like it's a little bit better, but like, no, look at all this stuff. Because when we bring that out, it's gonna hurt people, right? Like it's gonna be worse than the tool server to labs migration. It's going to be a whole other migration where, wait, I have to put my stuff in some different format, do some different thing, and I don't have any time, and 20% of tools are just going to disappear because of it, right? Their maintainers are just going to be like, I don't even care anymore. So it needs to fulfill on some pretty good things for us to make people go.
From my mind, that may be one of the better meta things going on. We have an occasional sea change to shake things up and make everybody look at their stuff and update it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's when the infrastructure goes stagnant for like 5 years running that things can get really outdated.
Right.
Yeah,
Shake things up every couple of years with a platform change.
in the long now view, right?
Yeah.
Like we're a movement that's trying to collect all information and knowledge so that we can redistribute it to everybody. This stuff all washes out. Like all these short-term, like, oh my God, half the people left and they're mad at me. Like that's fine, because 75 years from now, those people aren't around to be mad at me anymore anyway.
Right. We're all dead. That's the solution.
Yeah. You eat much better than I do.
Also, one other thing is that kind of what you're talking about all exists natively in Kubernetes. Like right now, if you write a web service and you go to run it on Kubernetes, we've essentially like globbed up a deployment, which then creates a single replica set, which tells the Kubernetes stuff to basically the manager, the reconciliation loop that says, is it running, should it be running? And we basically keep one instance going at all times, right? And the way that it does that is essentially, is the container up, and then is there a health check, which is a native mechanism that allows it to be like more contextual about what is it up mean. So we have that baked in, but part of the issue is once we present it the first time to users as if we want them to use it, it better be the way that we want them to use it for the next X number of years. Right. Because that's a really expensive thing to get your mind around. And the underlying mechanism right now is pretty low level. I'm not saying that people aren't smart enough, but I'm not sold on sort of evangelizing it either. But I mean, it's there. We just haven't. Hopefully, there's two kind of contenders for a PaaS-like solution. Red Hat has one that's sort of the gorilla in the room called OpenShift, which I've played with some and I've seen presentations or whatever. And then there's another place that is sort of like the OpenShift model is, let's wrap everything up, let's put a pretty little bow on it so we can charge people. We have, the Red Hat, it's their whole thing, right? Like we have an OpenShift origin, which then becomes our product, which we can now sell. And there's no real difference. And in fact, when we went to KubeCon, whenever that was, in November, a lot of the coming access control stuff is all being backported from OpenShift to Core. in Kubernetes. So I think that it's pretty tight integration there, and it's possible. But the alternative is third party called Deis, and I think their product is also called Workflow. And their whole model is essentially you should run all the components that enable this push to deploy model as containers, and it's all just kind of baked in. You know what I mean? Like they eat their own dog food for running the sort of layers that flesh this out. I don't know which is better. I think that one might be more flexible, but OpenShift is cool. I'm hoping that one of those two things makes that model that you're talking about palatable. You know? So,
like one thing that might be done today is there's lots of, or maybe lots, but I know one that will do a health check for free on like 5 endpoints. Is that something that would be alright, or is there some kind of like
No, that's
free,
legit.
but nothing for free?
Yeah,
That's
if you-
what it costs.
If you can find some uptime monitoring as a service thing out on the universe and you want to point it at your web service, do it.
yeah.
And that was the project that Chase mentioned earlier, that there's I think at least a couple volunteers that are involved in trying to spring that up. They're basically trying to build a labs project next to Tool Labs that would just do that. Its job would be to be a
Yeah.
the problem there is you can't tell if there's no connectivity into labs, outside of labs, right? That kind of wondering. But yeah.
I think that's awesome, and I hope they can succeed. I'm not sure that's the long-term solution.
Yeah, I don't know that it's magically scalable, but it's worth letting somebody give it a shot. and
Basically,
find out some
if you're
problems.
interested in solving this problem, we're happy to like.
How does Kubernetes tie in with OpenStack, or is that not at all?
How did, sure, yeah, well, so the Kubernetes VMs pieces are OpenStack VMs. So basically, OpenStack is the infrastructure as a service. It handles the networking, compute, memory, storage stuff for us today. And then Kubernetes sits in pieces on top of that, and it does.
That's not necessarily how it should be.
Yeah, and there are projects that integrate things more heavily, all the things to run Texas in Kubernetes containers or directly on the stack, not VMs. That's not currently just where we've been stuff in Kubernetes on VMs is the requirements for us students.
And I think Faden's that's not necessarily like we could run Kubernetes on bare metal, like so in the grid that they're setting up in production, I believe is on bare metal.
Also, we could use Heat, which is open source container orchestration. You know, but I don't know how mature.
Kubernetes on OpenStack is basically MediaWiki as well. They're not tied together.
It's
And it might just.
1 minute into a break.
Oh,
Okay.
we're at
20-minute break.
So I guess we rambled through all of it. Break time now, but if there are things people want to keep talking about these things, I'm around for the rest of the day. I'll be here tomorrow. Fabricator IRC email, BD808. You can find me. Fabricator is probably the best for a lot of these kind of like longer theory, like the monitoring things and stuff. And I think if you go, I don't have the numbers memorized because I'm not that guy, but I'm pretty sure if you go look at the Tools Labs project, you'll see a big ticket that says, Jesus Christ, why don't we have monitoring?
Fabricator is a great place to vent ideas. People to mark on the side and install for 3 years.
Right.
At least it's been written down.
At least it's persistent. So the next time we have the conversation, we can go back and say, right.
This idea.
Exactly. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
group.